really does kind of bum me out.
Oh,
Because, I really like Tom Hanks. He seems like he's a cool guy.
Good afternoon.
We're just vibing.
Yeah, it's fine. Good afternoon, Richland College. You are listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. Broadcast alive from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. Views expressed on this show are our own, unless otherwise stated, and do not reflect the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the DCCCD. Welcome, y'all. Welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Special ep today. So we've got some special guests, and y'all are new to the studio, new to broadcasting, perhaps.
Yeah,
Definitely.
Yes, definitely.
Happy to have y'all here. This is the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. Somebody call my lawyer. Somebody's liable. We meet the Philosophy Club proper meets every Tuesday from 3:30 to 4:30 in EO32, and this is the Philosophy Club Radio Hour. It's an extension of the Philosophy Club, and we broadcast live every Thursday right here in KDUX Studios from 3 to 4 o'clock. Now, this is again, it's an extension of the Philosophy Club. So what does that mean? It means that we continue on the discussion that kind of was beginning to advance on Tuesday. We also do a little bit of a recap, but of course we're Thunder Ducks, so we call it a re-quack. Thank you very much. And yeah, so then we just kind of keep the ball rolling. Now, again, when I say special guests, we had a special collaboration on Tuesday. Woo. We collaborated with another on-campus group called PARC, P-A-R-K, or rather C, Pride at Richland College, quack. And yeah, so, well, here, I'll tell you what, we usually do introductions. Okay. Get it? Introductions?
Introductions.
Thank you, folks. Thanks. We're very Mobius. And so I'll allow you all to introduce yourselves. And also, we kind of like to crowbar plugs into the introductions. So plug any particular, club, or maybe you're involved in some sort of event that's coming up later. Anything that you want people to be aware of. Now's the time to do it. We'll start at the far end.
Oh, God, with me?
Okay. I should start.
Oh, wow. You go to the one person who wasn't at the meeting on Tuesday. Hi, nice to meet you all. I'm Victoria. I'm here mainly kind of observing, and yeah. I'm a member of the PARC group. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm super nervous because I wasn't expecting to have to talk. I literally came here to chill. No.
Well, the introductions usually take about 5 minutes each. So
Yeah.
I'm
Keep
joking.
going.
I mean, I can tell some. No, I'm just kidding. Most of the
Please
jokes
do.
I know that are great are really inappropriate, so I will not tell them at school.
Keep them off camera.
Yeah, we'll keep that stuff off camera.
All right, well,
But
glad to have you here.
Well,
oh,
maybe
thank
on
you,
a
thank you. I
different camera.
appreciate it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I knew that there was a radio station here, but and the recording studio, but I didn't know that you guys could do video recording too. That's pretty crazy.
Oh, yeah, this is uploaded to YouTube. So,
Oh, yeah, wow.
You're going to be a star any second.
Woo! Yes.
And I just follow the YouTube, so.
Thank you very much. That gives us 3 followers. I'm joking.
Hey, by the end of this meeting, we might have 4.
Maybe 5? What?
Oh, my gosh.
So many followers.
Cancel spring break. We're just going to have a pledge-a-thon.
All right. I'm Ray. I am also a member of the PARC Club.
Welcome.
Yeah.
So are you both officers? The first 2?
Nope.
I'm the only officer of PARC. Ray and...
We're officially now members. Have you
Yeah,
gone to
you're
3
official
meetings?
members. They've come to enough things so they know sort of what we're about.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
But I'm
Right
the
on.
officer. I've been to PARC for 4 semesters now.
Okay. What's your name?
Oh, I'm Lindell. I am the PARC secretary, sort of. I mostly make sure everything gets written down if it needs to be written down, or I make sure things get plugged if they need to be plugged.
Awesome.
So plugging our little club, PARC Pride at Richland College.
It's not little. Have some pride.
Yeah, we get actually quite a few members
That was
in
a good
here.
joke.
We're always just trying to get more, though, because we know there's so many people who are wanting to know or are in sort of the LGBT community. So,
Yeah, for sure.
But anyways, our club meets Thursdays at 12:30 to 1:30, and the planetarium, which is
WH116.
Yeah, 116.
WH116. I forget. I just know it as the planetarium, which actually doesn't look like a planetarium anymore. It's used as like an art history room.
Yeah,
So-
it's now it's referred to as the old planetarium,
Planetarium.
which means it's not functional anymore.
Yeah.
Sadly, but yeah, the big brass dome. That's where the philosophy club has our film series, Philosophy in Film, PHILM, film. Get it? Thank you. I came up with it. Thank you. I'll take it. I tell my students all the time, I don't know the difference between fake and real laughter, so it's all good. It's all real to me. Yes, fantastic. So check. So y'all just had a meeting today.
Yes, we did.
Okay, cool.
It was our drop-in meeting, which we have a different sort of meeting type every 4 weeks. So the first week is a drop-in where it's the best kind of get to know you, just have friends, be social, play some games.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah. The next week we're gonna be doing a discussion meeting. The fourth week we do, the third week we do an activity, and the fourth week is sort of up to how we're feeling. Sometimes it includes planning activities for the next month.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes it includes maybe having a guest speaker or someone like that, or whatever the group decides they want to do for that fourth week.
Yeah, so you kind of keep it open. You kind of keep it.
Flexible, for sure.
Flexible, yeah.
Very flexible.
Heck yeah.
Yeah,
friend.
and that's cool.
Oh, I should probably get a little closer to the mic if I'm going to talk.
So what did y'all play today? What were your games?
So I played a new card game, which is like a spell game. It's called like Battle Wizards. We had people play Betrayal of the House on the Hill. Betrayal of the House on the Hill. Cards
Clue.
Against Humanities.
Yeah.
Clue.
We also had cookies.
And we had cookies. Our
Oh,
club
he always
advisor.
brings the best cookies.
Oh, they're
Yeah.
so good.
We had our
Yeah.
club advisor bring in chocolate chip oatmeal cookies, so it's very
Feel free to grab a seat, or
yummy.
there's an open mic.
yeah. We have one open mic, and we'll kick one person out.
Oh,
Yeah.
thanks.
Yeah.
If another philosophy club member, I really hope another philosophy club member comes,
Yeah, no,
because
Save
that
us.
would be neat.
Oh no, don't worry. That's what I'm here for. We have a member here. We have Noah. Say hi, Noah. We're not done with introductions.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Okay, fine. Continue on. That was my introduction. We
All right.
love Park.
Awesome.
Yay.
Anyone can join.
It's a lot of fun. You don't have to be gay to be a member of PARC
Yeah.
either. You can just be like accepting of other people
Yeah.
that are non-heteronormative.
Wait. I have a question. Do you feel as though people generally think that they have to be gay to belong to Park?
There are definitely people who feel like if they go to Park, others will see them as gay, and they don't want that attention on them. And there are people who feel like, oh, well, that's not really my group, so I don't know if I can have any say there. And it's like, no, anyone can come in, right?
Interesting.
Anyone.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, it's the same thing with different clubs that deal with marginalized people. So, like, the Black Student Association tends to only have black people in there. And that's just because they're... And they tell me, we're open for everyone.
Yeah,
we
yeah.
want to do collabs with other members, but people don't feel like they can come in because that's not their group.
Oh, that's.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to hear that. I didn't realize that was the
Yeah.
case. I mean, look, just because you come to philosophy club doesn't make you a philosopher. So it's like, but having said that, everybody is philosophical. So I mean, I don't want to dissuade anybody who thinks of themselves as a philosopher. You definitely are. Okay, but having said that, let's conclude introductions. I'm anxious to get into the meat of the discussion, and I want to actually go beyond what we talked about, because
Oh, definitely.
the activity was fantastic. It was super eye-opening to me, frankly, and it spawned a really great discussion. But I feel like we were kind of just skimming the surface of what we could have talked about.
Definitely were. A
Yeah.
lot of it was just knowing words and knowing what was happening. Oh, our screen.
Which is important. Sorry, let me help you out. There we go.
Yay!
We're still on camera. Just that's what we see.
I want to sort of just make sure I'm in frame and not covering.
You're good. So yeah, Noah. Say hello, sir.
She's
Hello.
the star over here.
I'm Noah. I'm here as an observer. I might pitch in a little bit, but doing homework at the same time. So
Okay.
Yes, it is. I mean, our listeners should know. So that goes out to my mom and my one cousin. Joking. Our listeners should know that it is. We're on the precipice of spring break, which means that most, if not everybody, has midterms this week, especially today and especially tomorrow, Friday. So everybody's cramming. You don't see Dusty here. Poor Dusty is. We usually have a regular crew here, but everybody's scrambling because of midterms and the possibility of an extended spring break due to the coronavirus. So. Lots of variables here. I'm glad to have you, Noah.
Thank
Noah's
you.
taking a midterm in my class very soon. Tomorrow, in fact.
Yeah.
This will be
Do you
interesting.
feel prepared, Noah?
Yeah, good question.
For at least half of it, I do.
Have you been studying?
That's a solid 50. It's a solid 50.
The other guy, it's two philosophers. The other guy is just really strange.
Is that one Hegel?
Yeah.
It's Hobbes and Hegel. Okay, folks, and I'm Professor Manzi. I'm the faculty advisor of the Philosophy Club. So, yeah, let's get into it. So, I suppose we could do a little bit of a recap in terms of explaining what the activity was. Do y'all want to sort of handle that? Maybe introduce how...
So I'm
Yeah.
the one that was there and actually
Through entirety.
did the meeting, sort of, in a
throwing
sense.
shade on your friends here.
No, I was taking a final for like my word processing class. Like I needed to get it done.
Wait, there's a word processing class?
It's a requirement actually in the networking degree plan. Like you
Right
have
on.
to take it, even though it's like it's annoyingly easy. But then there's like little ways. I don't want
It's
to get into all
annoyingly
of it.
easy.
Yeah,
That's out of scope. Of this
yeah, it's
episode.
out of scope of this conversation. But anyway, continue.
Yeah.
So for a little background, as PARC, the school allowed us and some other official officers of PARC to go to a conference called Creating Change. And Creating Change is general. They do a lot of social justice things, from like making sure we get people out to vote. They had a huge thing so many panels about the census and making sure they can get as many people as they can on the census. They have things about disability, racial inequality, gender inequality. So it's general making and supporting movements.
Does
right?
this conference, feel free to burp into the mics, does this conference happen every year?
It happens every year. It's a national conference. It changes. So it was in Dallas this year. Next year we'll be in Washington, D.C.
Okay, so it happens every year. So you say it doesn't change?
Well, it changes its location, so it
fair
does change.
That'll be the first of many jokes that do not go over well. Yes, continue.
But I went there. We went to a panel called Beyond Binaries, which is the activity that we did.
Okay.
This amazing activist woman named Robin Oates created it, and it's sort of, she calls it a community work in progress. And the basic idea is it's like the Kinsey scale, which is writing sort of the variations of between homosexuality versus heterosexuality. And then Robin opens it up to a few more identities and making sure it's not specifically sex-based but gender-based, so that we're making sure to include people that are trans. It also includes the idea that there are people who do not want to answer the questions or
Right.
are unable to because it just doesn't apply to them. So it gives a little leeway for that with like X's or not applicable to me's.
And it's anonymous.
Yeah, it's anonymous too. So we did it as an anonymous thing, just to make sure we could try to get more honest answers from
Yes.
people.
Yeah.
And it was basically just going over sexuality and romantic attraction. Had a few questions about desire, and a question about monogamy versus non-monogamy. It had questions asking about the past and present desires, and it asked like, hey, what ages were you when all of this stuff started coming out?
Yeah.
Right? And the main idea for the activity that I really think people get into perspective is just because we use one label does not specifically mean everyone will know exactly where they lie in that spectrum, right?
Yeah.
So on the activity, it says 1 through 7, and typically a 1 would be heterosexual, right? However, there are a few people who have 1 or 2 in there, or 2 to 3, who still apply as heterosexual, even though maybe they might a little bit have some feelings in one way or another towards the opposite or the other gender.
Yeah, and so this is kind of what I really appreciated about it, among a number of things, is that it does offer a safe space for sort of honesty, and it's not just introspective honesty because obviously it's public, the activity itself, but it does so in a way where you're disclosing without being self-disclosive, and so the nature of the exercise is that everybody fills out the particular what'd you call that? Just
The questionnaire survey?
Yeah, questionnaire. Yeah, it's a good word. Everybody fills out the questionnaire, PHIL, thank you folks, and philosophy, plug. And what happens is we reorganize the anonymous questionnaires. So then you respond to the various activities which require mobility, which is to say that, for example, the first question might be, where would you identify in a scale of 1 to 7 in terms of hetero versus, I guess, homosexual? Mm-hmm. And so depending on the anonymous flyer or questionnaire that you have, you go to that number that's on the floor, and the numbers are scattered. And the idea is to see, through the various questions, how people move from one number to another, when I think the traditional understanding is that nobody should ever move. But what we came to find, we had almost like 40 people at the meeting, was that a lot of people were moving around.
And at
which is
the
awesome.
end of the activity, everyone in that room had moved.
Yeah.
At one point or another. Most of the time, there was plenty of people who would stick in the same spot. Other people would flex wildly between one number or the other, especially when we're dealing with the PARC members specifically, or people who are closeted with their friends and family's perceptions of them.
Yeah, and I that's what I came to notice is, and again, if the listeners are or the viewers are curious about exactly what the questions were, all of them, I believe there's a shot of it on the Philosophy Club Instagram page.
Oh, awesome.
So yeah, if you go to the most recent upload, I believe that we have at least the vast majority of the questions on the big screen there. So yeah, and the point of this exercise in your mind is what?
So for me, I really like it. It one puts in perspective if someone had never even seen some of these words or questions before, gets them to start thinking about it and how it applies to their own lives, especially over time.
Awesome.
It also puts in the idea that just because someone might say they're gay, that does not mean they're exclusively, only, exactly, never even had a thought about the other gender, right?
Yeah, so yeah, exhibiting that sexuality exists on a spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And how labels are important to a lot of people, especially with how they define themselves and how it applies to them. But also just because someone says they're one label, you still don't know exactly how unless you get to know them and talk to them.
Yeah.
Right? You won't know exactly what they mean by that. And it's just to open your eyes a little bit about concepts like that.
And sometimes if you're talking to other people about this, you might discover things about yourself. New ways of labeling, things along these lines. Now, yeah, the exercise was fantastic. For all, I think it accomplished everything you're hoping it was going to accomplish. And then, yeah, it sparked a really awesome discussion, a really, I think, fruitful discussion. Now, I was a little afraid, though, because it started to seem like it was kind of becoming like a Q&A.
Yeah,
you know what
I was
mean?
really scared of that would happen because a lot of people were coming in there and seeing a whole bunch of new words. Like some people had not known what monogamous was.
Yeah, yeah.
And for those who don't know, monogamous is the idea that if you are in a relationship, you are in a relationship with strictly one person. And there are people who don't have relationships with one person. There are people who, unfortunately, maybe cheat. There are people who knowingly get into a relationship with multiple people, with everyone consenting. There are people, and there are people who are married for so many years, and they decide, hey, let's have some fun, go out and have a swing party. You know,
Let's open it up.
let's open it up. Let's have some fun.
It's getting a little stale in here.
Stale in the relationship. We're secure. You know.
Yeah. And who do I call for that? No, I'm joking. Okay.
There's plenty of people you can.
So the point, though, is that I think overall is that in order to really have the discussion, people needed to first become familiar with the terms.
Yeah.
And I think it was a lot of familiarizing. That was the majority of the discussion. It was still a good discussion, like I'm saying, because you have a lot of people who come to the Philosophy Club every week, and they want to learn new ideas and learn about new approaches and ways of articulating themselves and new ways of seeing themselves. So that's why I think it was so fruitful. But yeah, I think we could go a bit deeper today.
Yeah, there's one question that I would really love to get into that you specifically asked. So
okay, yeah,
yeah,
go for it. Let's hear it.
Okay, so we were talking about the idea of gender on the spectrum for briefly, and I spoke that I was non-binary and what that meant. Briefly,
can you please? Yeah.
Yeah, briefly, non-binary is an umbrella term, which means it covers a big spectrum, but it means that you are not male or female strictly, right? You are between the X or the Y. You are between the one or the other.
Right.
And for me, I am between. And people were talking about that, and then we were talking about the idea of, well, if people were able to choose their gender freely, if we were free from all gender expectations from society and stuff like that, would gender still exist? And would there be a reason for people
Great
to
question.
identify as male or female, trans, or non-binary at all?
Let's get into it because, I want to say briefly, your club advisor, shout out Christopher, finance officer here at
We
Richland.
love Christopher.
Yeah, no, he's great.
Makes good cookies.
He makes good cookies.
What? I've never got any cookies.
club just
Come
for
to
the
the
cookies.
club just for the cookies. He had oatmeal chocolate chip cookies today.
What? It's like my favorite.
Oh yeah, he brought so many. Everyone could have like 2. I had 3, so
Christopher, you come to the Philosophy Club every Tuesday. Bring us cookies. Bring me cookies.
sorry.
We don't have to share them.
I guess he plays favorites. With
Yeah,
the
apparently
park.
so. Well, it
Yeah,
makes
they're
sense.
like
It's-
super moist and chewy too. Like you don't even know the half of it. They're so good.
I'd like to know a bite of it. Okay. Yeah, so, but I believe he was discussing something along these lines where he said as language develops, our ability, because what is language? Language is how we articulate our points in a way that individuates them from other points. So when I say one word, I don't mean other words. That's one way to approach it, at least. I think that's how he sees it. And so
Yeah.
language is, for him, it's so important because as language grows, as vocabulary, as the lexicon expands, so does the possibility of considering yourself in new terms, literally new terms.
Yeah.
And with the advancement or the originating of new terms, you have, again, greater freedom. I think this is his point. Greater possibilities for seeing yourself or building yourself, constructing your identity in a way that is maybe not necessarily possible in previous times where you didn't have the language. And if you didn't have the language, you didn't have the concepts associated with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think that point you're saying is especially important when we're talking about more nuanced ideas of the words we use, especially for sexuality. Is there a friend?
That's Orlando. It's a Philosophy Club president. Yeah.
Hello, we're so excited.
Glad you could make it, pal. There's a spot for you right up front.
No, I just stopped by to say hi. I'm just going to be lurking in the shadows for today, so.
What? No, you should totally join us.
Be like us. We're lurking in
Noah.
the shadows at a mic.
You want me?
Yeah,
Alright,
if you
I'll-
were
I'll
actually
give
there,
you
you
30
should
minutes.
really come sit here because
Yeah.
I wasn't.
Yeah, which I think we're gonna have to move the camera.
Hey.
Nope.
No, you sit there.
Join us.
Please. See, look, Noah's studying, right? So
Orlando,
you can
sit
study.
down.
Sit down with us,
Sit.
please.
You saw it here first. He caves.
Peer pressure.
He caves to peer pressure.
Peer pressure. Cave in. Say no to drugs.
All
right,
I feel
welcome.
the Rona already.
They were asking for you, Orlando. They were
we
like,
were.
we needed some Philosophy Club students. So, you can still move the camera. You can sit there. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'll
yeah.
move it for you if you want. I move it every
Smash it
time.
on the ground.
Yeah.
Just accordingly.
knock it over and break something, and they're gonna be like, "Oh, you did it!" And I'm gonna be like,
So you
Oh,
can
no, it's
spin
okay.
A little bit if you choose, I think.
I think I can hear it. Okay, testing,
"You
testing.
break it, it's cool. If I break it, I'm the idiot who came in."
No,
here."
see, now you can't see Ray at all.
That's fine. I'm cool with that.
Okay, if you're cool with it, then I'll
Oh,
start
man.
the show.
Yeah.
Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. We're friends.
Oh, now you can see my back fat. Thanks, guys.
Oh, man, okay.
If
We
we
don't
all
judge
scoot
here.
this way, then the camera can go right there.
I look right at the camera. Every day you see my face.
Wait, who's coming in? Is that Ferdinando there? Oh, look.
Oh, look at that.
Another philosophy regular.
Heck yeah. Maybe we'll have to do introductions again before we go
Oh,
back into
no.
our
No, it'll be
point.
okay.
No.
They already know you. It's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You
Who's
didn't know
that?
us. We were the important ones.
Oh, no. You guys took over, so I liked it. You know, I could just sit back, do nothing, and watch.
Yeah.
That's the
You
best.
can
Yeah.
study in your brain.
Uh-huh. There you go.
Yeah, you're studying right
Alright.
now so hard.
To recap, the ideas that we were
Just kinda getting
just
into it.
talking about, we already recapped the activity, and we were talking about the words we use to describe ourselves, a little bit about if it would eventually be necessary to even use words and stuff like that. That's the philosophy. And I was just going to explain that as the language develops, we tend to get more words to describe things in a more specific manner, right? And how a lot of people, they argue stuff about the bisexual and pansexual, which is a debated term, even in the LGBT community a little bit, of what exactly it means. And for some people, it has a slightly different meaning, while others, they're like, oh, it's basically the same thing. And so then comes the question, well, why do you even have both words? And the answer is, why do we have so many words for the color red? That's always my response, because different people mean different things by different words. You can say true red, the pure red, okay, that's the color on the spectrums and stuff like that. You can say maroon, you can say pink, you can say flushed red, like so many adjectives. And that's just basically an adjective to describe yourself, Bisexuality is liking two or more genders. Pansexuality is basically hearts, not parts. You liking multiple genders. Yeah. Some people say, oh, bisexuality is specifically thinking about, well, you like men and women and those in between. However, you would like them for different reasons, perhaps. But for other people, it's like, oh, all good. Bisexuality is just the word that I grew up with, so that's the word I use. Pansexuality is a newer term. It came up around the early 2000s, especially on the internet, where it's starting to develop, because people are like, okay, bi means two, but we also know that gender is a spectrum. What about this word? So
like color,
yeah,
spectrum.
It's a spectrum. Everything's a spectrum. Oh my god,
it's fluid, honestly.
Everything, it's wishy-washy. Time stuff.
And so Orlando, we were just saying, we were kind of recapping, excuse me, their advisor Christopher's point about how with the advent of new terms comes the freeing or the emancipation of new conceptual identities. Which is to say that now you can see yourself within those greater subtleties, within those deeper and more nuanced variations, and then allow perhaps a more precise representation of how you want to see yourself and how you want others to see you.
So I just have a quick question. Do you guys think that everybody, when they're experiencing, their sexuality, that they're always due to change? Or do you think there's going to be people that are always just fixed?
Good question.
There are definitely people who live and die by the thing that they started as. There are definitely straight people and gay people who just woke up to their experience, and that was their experience always. But we also like to make sure that just because someone changes doesn't mean they're less right, they were wrong, the phase was bad, right? Because we hear that a lot, especially as young teens growing up and learning about ourselves. Oh, that's just a phase, right? And so as a community, I think we're trying to move the LGBT and also PARC community is trying to go more and more saying change is okay. Your truth now can maybe not be your truth in the future, but it's still okay to experiment change and not criticize yourself completely.
Sounds very existentialist.
Yeah.
Well, I always like to think of it more of like what if it's a phase? Just make it a good phase. Like, don't make it like a really sucky phase of your life, honestly.
And so that would mean more specifically, I guess, owning it?
Yeah.
That kind of thing?
Definitely. Just own yourself at your time as you are now. And the rest will come as it comes.
Yeah, it sounds like you're preaching just complete acceptance of any possibilities, when it comes to who you are, what the self is, I guess.
Yeah, I just really want people to feel like they can express themselves fully as they are.
It's a beautiful sentiment.
Yeah.
Well, here's another question. Do you guys think that people always need the labels, though?
So I actually don't use labels for my sexuality. There's a lot of groups that I feel connections to, but I don't feel like you have to use them. I know a lot of people it helps, though.
Yeah. So, I feel like this whole idea is just that we can all always change, and it's always dynamic in terms of our identity. So, could there ever be just this overlying term for that? To say that, hey, we're just changing people. We just like to identify differently from time to time. Could there ever be something to express perhaps that rather than having a large spectrum of it?
Maybe that word will become people.
Yeah.
Okay.
I like to call it just straight vibing.
There you go.
Straight vibing. We're just vibing.
Okay.
Chilling.
A common term of if your identity kind of changes.
Why does it have to be straight vibing?
Oh, wow.
That was a good joke. Come on. Just give me something. I'm trying here.
Joffrey.
Somebody's trying to make a joke. Okay, keep going. Sorry.
No, but we do actually have some terms because there are people who have frequent fluidity and stuff like that between, where it is like fluid. The word is fluid, so like gender fluid, romantic fluid.
Gotcha.
Your ideas and sexuality and stuff changes, so you just put fluid at the end of it. There's also like flexible, right? So we have a fun term. It's not an actual quote unquote identity. Maybe some people use it, but like heteroflexible. So like I'm, hi, I'm super straight. I'm straight like all the time, but hey, bro, that one time at band camp. That's fine. We'll keep that on the DL. It's like super cool, heteroflexible.
Yeah, like
you're
All right.
So wait. So the difference between that and closeted is just being open with it.
yeah. I mean, you can be open to it. There's some people who like just, again, they feel like they're one way forever and always, and then like one time, something happens and they come to accept that, but that's not frequent at all. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm heteroflexible. I'm a dude. I like girls like always, except for maybe that one time. Like,
we don't talk about that time.
We don't
but it
talk about
happened.
it. We're joking, but it's now we're getting them sort of the more nuanced terms and more jokes of the community.
Yeah.
But it's just being like, hey, if one day something somehow happens, I guess I'll be open to it. So it's very like that.
Yeah,
that
actually
1% out of the 99.
Well, that's what I wanted to ask you. If you're to fit a label, hetero-flexible, that doesn't necessarily mean something's already happened. It could just mean maybe you're open to it, even if it never happens.
Yeah, that's
Even
kind
if
of
it
how
never
I view the
happens.
term hetero-flexible more. Like, I'm thinking like hetero-flexible, at least this is like, my understanding of the term was that if someone says they're hetero-flexible, for the most part, they've engaged in heterosexual relationships their whole life, but maybe they've thought about it or considered, and they're open to the idea of like, because I've heard a lot of guys say this and been like I love women, I find them attractive, I am definitely straight, but Brad Pitt's a sexy guy. Yeah,
Well, hang on a second.
like that to me is my notion of heteroflexible. Or like, that Vin Diesel, he's not a bad guy.
Like, top 5, if you would.
If I had to.
If I had to.
Well, listen, here's why I ask, because I feel like, again, traditionally speaking, I think you said it yourself. Fernando, your thoughts?
Not right now.
He's writing
Not
War
right
and Peace
now.
on his cell phone.
Ferdinando, sir.
That's what I said, Fernando.
Ferdinando.
It's all right.
Fernando.
He will get it. At the end of
I
the
said
semester.
Ferdinando.
You said Fernando.
No, I didn't.
Is that with the
Trying to
PH?
correct
Fernando.
the mistake.
I said it with a New England accent. Fernando.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, we
go with
believe you.
that.
It's okay.
He's deflecting because he's texting. Okay, so here's why I bring it up, because I think traditionally speaking, and you said it, most people think that identity is something that's permanent, and so that's why they feel. I imagine some people feel there's a lot of pressure when it comes to, I suppose, categorizing yourself or maybe even pigeonholing yourself, because the idea that you could change your identity in this kind of an intimate way is very scary to some people. Now having said that, I think what we're talking about here kind of alleviates that concern, because the idea is you don't necessarily have to actually like do something to I guess be able to construct a certain identity of yourself that you feel is more I guess authentic or more genuine. It's more like a willingness to see yourself in different contexts.
Yeah.
So rather than committing yourself to certain actions or habits.
Yeah. So one term we have,
that was smart.
that's absolutely correct. That's good job. Absolutely correct. Is like,
I didn't say that to the mic. I think Ferdinando did.
oh, thanks, Fernando. We love that, Fernando.
You're welcome. God, you're welcome. Ouch.
I'm so bad with names, guys. I'm so bad with names. I'm so bad with names.
I just
Me
think
too.
King Ferdinand and then Ferdinando.
Yeah, wars have started because of me.
Okay.
And by people with your last name.
Exactly.
So there's this idea of toxic masculinity, where it's the idea that there are some males who are so, I feel almost insecure in themselves, that if they do anything that's not within the label of masculinity, they feel attacked, or they'll feel misunderstood. They'll feel like they have to be on the aggressor side, and like terrible accidents have happened in the LGBT community because, a guy gets hit on by a gay man, and they feel like that's a personal attack on them.
Yeah,
And
I
their
have, I
masculinity.
have one thing in my head that I try
Yeah.
to make sense, and it's easier for me if I talk, and then since Manson's here, he can kind of direct my thoughts.
Well, I'll just say, first of all, you were fantastic at the meeting on Tuesday. Like, you had a lot of really good points. And, no, I'm serious. Like, your contributions are really good. So,
Well, thank
yeah.
you. I try to. I learn from all of you guys. Yes, that's what it is. So this is the thing. Like, for
Me
example,
mostly.
like, I remember that we were trying to like establish like how, let's say, straight or gay are you based on number 1 and 7 in the activity that we're having on Tuesday. But the thing is, okay, so that's based on how we perceive ourselves, correct? So it's very subjective more than objective. And the lady, I'm sure that I don't know your name yet. She was talking about
Orlando.
Well,
yes, exactly.
Orlando, we're talking
yeah.
about Orlando.
Sure,
No,
yeah.
no, not really, but yes, let's go with Orlando. That fits perfectly for this subject.
All right.
He yes-anded. That's great.
Yeah. So she was talking that some people may think of themselves like very straight, but still agree that Brad Pitt is sexy, right? So-
that was me.
Yeah. So
Victoria.
Victoria.
how really can we measure I don't know if measure is the right word. Again, I'm just trying to give ideas to these thoughts. Like, there are some people who behave stereotypically as we're supposed to perceive men as they are.
Like machismo kind of
Yes,
thing?
like machismo kind of thing. Like maybe they are the one who smoke, drink, and have a sip of something in one hand, something like that.
And then they go deliver a phenomenal philosophy lecture.
Yeah, exactly. But we have other people who are more willing to accept that maybe like the beauty of other men, but they don't really feel attraction to them. So what exactly really is then be straight? Like, it's not really something that objectively we can have access to it, because we kind of create our sense of what is hetero and gay, like according to what we see. But how can we actually measure if someone is gay or not, or if someone is maybe bi, or all these labels that I don't really have access to it. But to me, it seems like the actual question that you are proposing is something that we should be considering more, because I don't think people are really thinking into it. They're not accepting it as much as they should.
Yeah, so like the idea of like the Kinsey scale and the activity that we did is that, in a sense, it's really hard to try and identify and measure those kind of things. Maybe one day we'll be able to, but like currently, because we're just sort of doing word of mouth and stuff like that, it's a lot harder to distinctively say, oh, you are gay or you are straight, especially with the nuances of sort of that labels can have. So, I mean, it's hard to identify. It's hard to quantify. And in
also
the end,
to
it's up to the
accept.
individual.
Yeah.
Because what if the person doesn't want to really accept the idea?
Yeah, that's true.
Well, that sounds like more of an issue of self-acceptance, which it does take you a while to really like figure out who you are as a human being, and we're constantly changing as people. I mean, I'm sure you can like look back at a time of your life and think about how you had a very adamant opinion on a certain situation, and now that you've grown and had life experience, your opinion is very different. Like, I was raised in a really conservative Catholic family, and I was raised to believe that abortion was really wrong, but as I grew into a woman and had a myriad of life experiences and developed very good, and when I say intimate friendships, I just mean we intimately knew each other, not in a like sexual intimate way. I mean, there may
Not
have been
with
there
benefits,
might have
but-
been like one or two of those in there too. But like,
Thank you for
At
we
least some
won't get
sexual
into-
tension.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
yeah.
we're not going to get into all of that. But honestly, like a lot of the females that I made friends with as I grew and matured into adulthood, many of them, were put in a position where they had to make that choice. And my opinion on that matter has dramatically evolved. Like, I don't, so it's kind of one of those things, like, you need to accept yourself, but you need to understand that life experiences may change your perception of these things, including of yourself.
And it will continue to evolve, perhaps.
Yeah.
And I think honestly, there is no true measurement. Obviously, the idea of like you might find someone more attractive than the other, but I don't think there's this idea of like a true measurement. Maybe it's just something that is kind of inherited to us, like how you were saying about your conservative family. And I think it's very interesting because I think even like homophobic men themselves might even have these homosexual tendencies in and of themselves, and that's where that phobia might stem from.
Oh, I think it totally
and I think
does.
it's hilarious, and I think like how you were talking about, it's all this insecurity, and insecurity. It's like, for me as a straight person, I'm not going to go and say, oh, that man isn't attractive. I would admit it, and so that's the whole point. And so I think the whole idea here is
Thank you.
that there's no true measurement, but it's just like how you guys are talking about this identification.
Yeah.
And for some people, they just struggle with that.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's also like kind of part of the idea of like accepting fluidity in the community, where like we as people are evolving our ideas of who we are. So like we have to accept that might change. So,
but you can understand why that might be scary for people, because
so scary.
People try to live in such a way where they want to know exactly who they are. And what y'all are proposing is that, well, there is no end point, so to speak. There is no like secret inside of you. This is who you really are. The fact is that maybe people just change continually until they die. And so I think that in and of itself, I think is a very disturbing notion for many people. And I think that is the seed for why thinking about anything outside the box, not just sexuality, is scary. Not difficult, but just people might be unwilling because, they remember what it was like being younger and not knowing who they were or being told who they were. And now that they're adults, they're like, okay, now I know who I am. And they don't want to let that go.
Yeah. And
not defending the position. I think that's what happens. Yeah.
No, definitely. There has been many times in my own life that I have seen and times that I have heard of and spoken to people where that is a thing that happens. There are people who are, and admit, they are bullies to kids in high school and stuff. They are mean, they are rude, they are vicious, and, especially declaring like a homosexuality and stuff as a sin. And then later in life, when they are out of their parents' home and out of high peer pressure environments, that they open their mind a little and realize, actually, I am gay too, And they just spent so many years or so many times and such a length of their life hating themselves almost for these ideas and thought processes they had, And then there's people who just hate and hate and hate for the rest of their lives. So,
yeah, no, there's arguably nothing more tragic than being hated for the way you love.
Yeah.
There's that. I think that's very, very clear. And so, I guess the difficulty is, we're talking about how considering your sexuality on a spectrum and collapsing these sort of polarities, these binaries, is beneficial insofar as, individually speaking, you are individuating to an even greater degree because you're having more specific terms with which you can articulate yourself, and that's helpful for other people. But here's the thing: is that, and it's just that when you talk about sexuality in particular, you have to consider other people. It takes at least two to tango.
Yeah, in most cases.
And so it's,
I'm sorry, I
I'm
couldn't
advising
help
the wrong
myself there.
and so I say it's for the following. That's a great laugh. I want that to be my ringtone.
That's the genuine laugh, by the way.
We got to start the podcast like that. I like it.
And so I only say it's for the following reason. If typically speaking, so imagine the cross section of the population who are interested in entering into a monogamous relationship, regardless of their sexuality. Mm-hmm. That requires conviction in oneself and in terms of what one wants, and it requires commitment and sort of, again, endurance. Mm-hmm. And so how does that kind of structured relationship help somebody who's trying to, again, explore the changes of their own sexual landscape? I guess it seems like there are certain kinds of relationships that would keep the freedom from being as free as it could be.
Well,
I think, or maybe not. I don't know.
No,
I think it could actually, in some instances, do the opposite. Because
Okay.
for some women to be constricted like that and to see, oh man, I actually don't really find this man as attractive as I thought I did, or maybe I'm not. Maybe I'm more attracted to women. It might have that opposite effect. I think what's kind of funny is it's kind of like Aristotle's golden mean. It's like first you have to like understand the opposite of what you want to kind of gauge closer to that perfect scale. Not perfect necessarily, but closest to it.
Okay, that's interesting. But that becomes problematic if you come to that realization when you're already married with 3 kids.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean,
what do you do?
that has
I'm serious.
happened
What
so
do you
many
do?
When it comes to that,
It's not about you. That point.
it's about you. It's about them. It's about your family and stuff. There's a lot of stories that I hear of people who get married into a relationship only to find out later, as they've grown, that hey, I'm actually attracted to just females now.
Isn't that the pilot of Friends?
Yeah, pretty much.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, Ross's wife
left
marries
him for
another
a woman.
another woman.
Wow.
And some people wait until the kids grow up and move out of the house before they divorce. There are some people who are like, it's better now. It's really honestly up to the family and the dynamic, and it's hard because love is beautiful and fluid and stuff like that. It can be messy. It can be really messy and hard for some people.
Especially if you feel like you have to choose between who you really are and what you've already
I think
accomplished. Or
to some
achieved.
extent, it can show the true colors of your partner. You know, I mean, I'd hope that you'd find someone who's understanding and sympathetic of what you might be going through. And in that instance, I think it takes them to be the bigger person to say, well, you know what? If this makes them happy, then I should be willing to understand that.
Yeah, but at the same time, I could also kind of understand like the feeling of betrayal. Like imagine,
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was
pouring-
thinking. Yeah.
Imagine pouring like I don't know, like 24 years of your life into a relationship with someone, and there was always like something a little off. You could never gauge it, but you've had kids, you've given the best years of your life. You don't look like you looked at the beginning of that 23 years. The dating scene has totally changed, and then all of a
Seems
sudden, like
personal.
you find out, oh, okay, so I'm married to a gay man. Like I could understand that being very hurtful to somebody, but
That's true.
yeah, and stuff.
But
I mean, it's
also it's not something against you. It's just that
Yeah.
it's a person
Yeah.
trying to fight into a society that doesn't accept what he was or he is in this case.
And you might even have to question yourself, well, how much of this person did I really understand if they had
Yeah.
something this big that they were hiding or that
Yeah,
they
that
were
is
fighting
true.
or
Yeah, that-
combating?
That's I think.
yeah,
I think
but
that's-
I would say that it would be very normal for someone to maybe feel a sense of betrayal.
Definitely, yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's also really hard for like literally everyone in this situation, because imagine that you did think you loved someone for that long and you did also pour your life, and then the guilt that happens
Yeah.
that when you realize that you're falling in love with someone else or you are more attracted to someone else, even if you never, can
Acted on it.
act on those feelings or speak of those things, just the inner guilt of knowing I have my whole life and kids and family with that, and now I'm feeling these things. Do I ever speak up about it? There's people who live and grow and die old and become 80, and only then, when their partner dies and their family are all grown up and having their own kids and their kids have kids, that they're like, okay, I'm going to kiss my first girl. Like we're talking like old people now, it's really cute in some ways, but it's also really tragic in others.
But do you think
know?
that's the responsible decision, or do you think that's the irresponsible decision?
That's the decision that they came to make,
Yeah.
and it's not really my place to make the judgment on anyone / everyone who was in that situation.
Well, no, but that's what we're here to do.
Yeah.
I think,
Judgments, okay.
I think the idea is there's no right or wrong answer. It's
Okay.
just from person to person.
Person to
Well, no, but I
person,
mean,
yeah.
hang on a
I
second
feel
here.
like this is a very fluid matter. It's,
You're trying to switch us to one answer.
it might be a very non-binary situation.
I think we might be drowning in that. Let's well, no, because here's what I'm talking about. I'm talking about when it comes to the kinds of promises you make to your partner, regardless of who that partner is. When you enter into a relationship, it's built upon trust, and so it seems like if you're somebody who's maybe been harboring either for a long time or maybe not so long, harboring other instincts, we might say, or maybe one comes to realize it very late in the game, ought they not honor their commitments? And look, I'm playing devil's advocate here, only for the sake of what the relationship is. Because as soon as you realize that something's changed in you, shouldn't you tell your partner?
I think in
Or
a
not.
healthy relationship, that is something that you have conversations with your partner about realizing and stuff like that. And especially you will realize, I think, you are in sort of a healthy committed relationship if that's that. But if you're fearful and scared and all these other things of how they will react, it gets a lot harder to talk about it. And I think that's when you have to also reevaluate your relationship. Just a little bit, I'm not making judgment on the whole relationship, but on that specific part, that's something you'll have to think about. But if we are in an ideal relationship, and you get married and have kids and you end up in this situation where you realize maybe you're a little bit more bi than you thought and you want to experience more things, talking about that with your partner and going through communication and maybe some couples therapy and stuff is something that I can definitely recommend, because there are people who talk about it and even in the terms of a monogamous relationship choose to explore that a little bit and let your partner have the freedom to be able to look or talk about those feelings that they are currently having, can put so much pressure off of both people. So like it can put pressure off, I feel, the person where this is happening to, where it's not changing. They love their partner forever and always, and realizing, oh, hey, the person that I love is changing in a sense. The person that I love might not like me 100% as they used to be. That's something that I personally would feel more secure in, knowing that, okay, I'm saying, hey, I understand. You can look, you can see these things, talk to me about it. And then hopefully that'll strengthen the relation to the point where it doesn't break up in a cataclysmic way, I know not everyone can do that. Not everyone's can sort of handle these feelings, because that can be very hard.
But I see what you're saying is that the key is communication. So if a person started harboring these new instincts and then rather than being revealing to their partner, they just went and kind of like cheated behind their back, that's not the right way to handle it.
That's not the right thing to do. Or harboring it inside yourself so much that you get guilted and you can start to develop depression or suicidal things. That's also not the right thing, because your partner will sense that too.
But do you think the partner would have a right to say, well, okay, you weren't like this when we married, so I want a divorce?
Well, I would hope that they were. Oh,
room
sorry.
for that. There's definitely that happens.
Like, would they be justified?
Well, I would hope that they were built upon this idea of love. And when it comes to justice, what are you basing this idea of justice of?
Based upon
society,
their notion of you.
Because wouldn't it be
based upon what you said?
Well, wouldn't it be based upon love? And if you really love the person, wouldn't you want to have what's going to make them the most happiest?
But that's the question. I thought you were a different person.
Because that's the whole idea. Then once again, is that if you love this person who you understand is going to be changing, but that still doesn't
isn't that person still the same person though? Because the only thing that changed was.
Well, I think. Here's another question. I think, would you have some kind of responsibility, or how would you handle this situation with your children? Like, should you right up front, if you and your husband decide to do this, should you right up front let them know that, hey, me and your dad are no longer going to be together, or I'm going to be seeing, like, how would that go?
Well, then we're getting to just divorce technicalities, and as a child of divorce who happened at 6, I was cool with it after a couple of years. But if I had found out when I was 18 that my parents hated each other for such a long time, which is what happened to my mom, her parents, from after a couple of years she was born, did not like each other. And they harbored those feelings. They hardly talked. They argued all the time throughout her life until she was 18. And all her sisters had moved out of the house, and she had moved out of the house. That they finally divorced, and she was like, "Oh, thank fucking God!" At that point, sorry, excuse my language.
Thank quacking God.
Thank quacking God. Thank Mobius.
As a product of one of those
now Jack has to edit.
Get divorced until I was much older. Yeah, I know. My family's super dysfunctional. I actually had to help divorce my parents.
Oh my gosh.
And from a family of all the kids, I'm disowned. So yeah, but I have to come in and basically help you guys get a divorce or whatever before my dad died. But anyway, we're not going to get into my whole family. And how
I feel like we're just getting into it.
It's an interesting story.
Yeah, I know. That's some interesting stuff. Like sometimes it's worse for the children. Like if you keep people together that are toxic for one another.
No, that's true.
Yeah.
But again,
I feel like it's a situation by situation basis.
But not so much
curious,
divorce,
though.
but divorce for this reason. Yeah.
Couldn't it have some kind of a lasting effect on your children, though?
So there are plenty of people that this has happened to. For me, as a child of divorce, it wasn't because of
Sexuality,
specific sexuality,
yeah, yeah.
but monogamy versus non-monogamy.
Okay.
As in, people were cheating, right?
Oh.
And obviously, when you come to that point, it's no longer, I feel like, you were communicating and loving your partner the way they should be, right? And my parents chose to keep up that specific part of it out of the conversation at all until I, turned 18, actually, when they came together weirdly to have this conversation, because, like, as a child, it was just, look, we're not right for each other anymore. We don't really like each other. I know it's hard. We're moving away to Florida, and it's just this complicated, messy situation.
This, or
That's a
they
good-
just
that's a good-
decide
yeah,
to
that's a good
explain
point.
this?
Yeah.
To you? Because
So, I mean, it's kind of child-appropriate conversations.
Yeah. Well, let's not
Like-
get off track here, though.
Yeah.
Because there's something else I want to circle back around to, and I began to talk about this with Christopher after the meeting on Tuesday, but it never really made it into the overall discussion. I think I posed a question about it briefly, but I want to talk about one end of the spectrum, namely asexuality.
Oh, yes.
Because so here's the thing I was
love
wondering.
this community.
And again, I'm just becoming more familiar with it. But I had somebody present the following to me that it's almost, and I don't know the research. I'm certainly not defending this position. But here's something that was presented to me, and I presented it to y'all as advisor too. And it was like this: sexuality arguably can be reduced to biochemistry. And if you're a human organism and you produce certain biochemicals, you have to have a sexuality to you. It's not up to you. It's already predetermined. Now the preference itself, of course, is it's a variable. But the fact that you prefer something and that you are a sexual being on some level is not debatable. And so I wonder, well, what does that mean? Assuming the argument has some validity to it, what would that mean for asexuality? Is asexuality something like impotence, or is it more something like celibacy?
Okay, so first of all, it's neither of those. As a person,
Nailed it.
That's why we have a different term.
That's why we're talking.
So I struggled with. So as me right now, Lindell, hello, they, them. I'm non-binary. I don't use specific labels for that, and I also don't use specific labels for my sexuality. However, I was strongly within the asexual community when I was starting and exploring myself. And so I was learning all these things, learning all these arguments for and against these ideas that you are currently speaking about right now. And for some people, asexuality does come out of medical impotence. And it comes from, like, depression and stuff like that, where they just decide, I don't need that, I don't have those wants and desires anymore, and they can get help with that. So if you are in that situation where you aren't having any of these feelings and you are distressed and you feel like it's wrong and shameful and all this stuff, you can get help and learn to get past that.
And that could be something like, I don't mean to interrupt, but just
Yeah.
some following. You mean something like, I don't know, injections for whatever the biochemical might be?
So again, this is a very small population. This is not asexuality, right? But some people do confuse it for it. And in that sense, it's not really injections. It's getting treatment and therapy.
I see.
Right?
Okay.
Because a lot of times it stems from either disease or depression.
So it could be psychosomatic. too.
It-
Trauma.
Or trauma. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely trauma. Which means that in, like, actuality, you are not, in a sense, asexual, although you can totally identify with the community and we super accept you, yada, yada, yada. But it's like, there's that. And then there's the idea of celibacy. It's like, well, you just are choosing. But celibacy is a choice. There are people who are like nuns, who might grow up and think, oh, everyone's hot. I wish I could go out, go under the covers, do that stuff, but then decide not to because, for the example of nuns, they love the Lord. They're going to stay with them.
Yeah, for some other reason. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there's some people who are like, oh, I had a really nasty relationship, so even though I have feelings for different people or I might see someone that I would potentially hit on, I'm not going to because this messy relationship, I'm going to stay and not do or have sex for a while to repair, right? Yeah. However, asexuality is a sexuality, just like bisexuality and and heterosexual.
Pan.
Yeah, asexuality is the idea that you do not have feelings at all for anyone, and it's not for a reason. It's just how you are. So,
Okay.
For a heterosexual man, right? They love them girls. they would potentially totally want to get down, hook up with some woman. The feelings that they have for a male are nothing. It's null. They don't have any because they're heterosexual. They love the woman.
We're talking not heteroflexible.
Not full-on heterosexual. You are straight. So the feelings that they have for a man is nothing, right? For asexuality, it's not having feelings for men or women or at the in-between, right?
Okay, no, this is helpful.
You don't have
Sometimes
feelings for
only
me.
anime girls.
Interesting. Okay.
Sometimes not even the anime
I'm just
girls.
kidding about that, by the way.
Two dimension.
Hey, you're not
Two
far off.
dimensions.
There's someone who married an anime character or something like
I
that.
know.
What?
Yeah.
That
There
is
is a
like
person-
that is
yeah.
like the cringiest
And there is
thing
a
I've heard in
person
a
who
long
Was it
time.
Japan,
married
I think?
a-
It was
an
Japan.
hologram
Yeah.
or something like
Well,
that.
okay.
Really?
Yes.
It's a little less cringy. It's
Sort of.
like
How's
a-
it even legal? I'm serious. How do you even do
Japan.
that, practically speaking?
That
You'd be
is
surprised,
Legal.
Manzi.
You'd be surprised.
But
Love is love. Don't be so close.
Don't be so binary, man. What are you
So
doing?
binary.
How do they consummate the marriage?
You don't want to know.
So
You
in
do
the
not.
Oh
mind.
god,
Man
it
and
was
robot.
probably one of those
Alright,
anime
never
body
mind.
pillows too.
I
really
don't
don't know.
want to know.
All right.
Would that be a doll
Let's get
situation?
back in topic.
Okay. What time is it?
Orlando's like, I gotta
But
Oh, yeah,
We're
I
about to get
have to
canceled.
go soon. So.
oh no, I would see this topic is something that can go on for hours. Really.
Oh,
No, this
yeah,
is an awesome
like-
conversation, honestly.
Shall we come back next
Yeah.
week?
Yeah.
Well, too bad
We
it's
can come
spring
back
break,
next week.
I
Oh,
think.
Yeah.
Feel
I'll
free,
just
I don't know.
break
Feel
it
free to
down.
come back
It's
anytime.
definitely
Could we
spring
come
break.
back in the spring break?
Sadly, no.
spring
We,
break.
we,
Can
might,
we
we
break
might not
it
come back
to
after
it?
spring break.
That's
Yeah,
true,
we don't
yeah.
wind up in quarantine.
Oh my
Yeah, that's true.
gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we are not in
This might be the
quarantine.
season finale.
We're talking in
finale.
series
Talk about
finale.
that.
My breakout.
Series finale.
Finale.
I knew it.
Who do you love? Find out now before they die.
We,
It's to be continued on this episode for sure.
yeah, but we should probably start wrapping up. It's been over an hour.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Specifically asexuality is that. Now, for me, the reason why is that I still have romantic feelings towards people. I felt romantically inclined towards women, and sometimes occasionally dudes. But I was look. That's why I don't label myself. But I did feel romantically inclined towards people. I am currently in a relationship, right? However, I did not want to act out on those romantic feelings sexually. I didn't want sex, right? That is asexuality, not really wanting sex. There are people who are sex positive who, will have it if their partner's so inclined. There's people who are sex negative who will never have it, never, ever, ever, right? And there's people who are aromantic who don't want a relationship at all with anyone, period. They don't want sex. They don't want to hold hands. They don't want to kiss. There's some people who do.
Some aromantic people, it's more just like just aromantic, but maybe sexual.
Yeah.
Like,
they
So
don't want
it's-
companionship. Yeah.
Yeah.
For companionship is a thing, right? But asexual is specifically, I would say, sex isn't a core part of our identity because asexuality is not celibacy, it's not impotence, it's not any of that. It's, just not having those feelings, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean that's interesting to me because I was wondering whether or not it was actually like a category that's feasible, that's possible. But okay,
Yeah,
no, this makes sense.
actually, the evidence suggests it's about 1% of the population, which isn't large,
well, yeah,
but it
not
is
at all.
Bigger than Rhode
among
Island.
amount. It's bigger than Rhode Island.
Was that a shout at me? I'm from Rhode Island.
I'm
from Rhode Island.
Bigger than
Okay.
you. I'm
Yeah,
so
yeah.
sorry.
Wow.
Hey, that's just the one I know. I think New Jersey's all. It's either New Jersey or Canada.
You did your research
Anything
on the host,
smaller
and
than Rhode
I'm
Island,
flattered.
that's what it
Yeah.
is.
How dare you.
I'm your stalker.
Always
Nice to
wanted
meet
one.
you.
Those
Always
Cracker
wanted one.
Scouts were from
All
me.
right.
That chocolate was from me. You shouldn't have thrown it out. I put my heart into it. But yeah, this is
Don't check your bushes.
Well, something else really
Whoa.
quick before we
Super creepy.
sort of say goodbye here.
I see the camouflage now. That's right. I get it. It blends in.
Anyways,
Amazing.
Was there any particular response to any of the questions on the activity that surprised you? Because again, you saw it happen at the conference. You all did it within your own group in PARC, and so when you shared it with the Philosophy Club, was there anything that were you expecting something and then it didn't happen, or were you not expecting something and it did, in terms of like movement or responses?
So, for one thing, I was expecting less people to just put NA on a lot of things, because I learned a few papers that said like 0 on everything and not applicable on everything, which is totally valid. If you don't want to participate in the activity, that's super fine, while still like moving around and stuff.
Right.
You know, there were, so I mean, like, I wish they had felt comfortable enough to do that, but that's up to them again. So like, I wasn't quite expecting that, but I understand. But there's also, I saw a lot of, you know, again, those shades of gray. And I know some of those were specifically the park members, because, again, I did that activity with them, you know, so I sort of knew their answers.
It's not
and
anonymous.
Stuff.
It's a hoax.
But we don't really know that.
Yeah.
I mean,
Well, in the park group, after we did the activity, most of the people there were comfortable enough with themselves to be like, "Hey, you got mine." Like I kind of called myself out on one, because there was a section I got distracted talking with another entertaining member of the group, and I put my thing in, and I didn't answer the section about monogamy, and I have like very like distinctive views on that personal for me as a person. So
yeah, okay. And I don't know. It seems like maybe they're not. It's not that they're not comfortable with themselves. It's that they're not comfortable thinking of themselves in these new contexts.
Yeah,
probably.
I think that might be what
I
it is.
definitely saw some looks in there that were like, this is their first time really hearing about it, and they weren't really sure.
But that's good. Yeah, I mean, it's
what I
good
think
that
was interesting though is that a lot of the people who kind of seemed like they were kind of not afraid of it, but like kind of sort of rejecting it a little bit. I think they even got a little bit more into it,
I think
or they became a little more open, and so that was awesome to me.
Especially, I think, as they saw how the room reacted and moved around, they were like, okay, so I'm not the only one who's stuck in my spot as straight forever. Like, but there are people who have a little flexibility, and it's like, okay, cool. I feel a little less, I don't know, pressured.
Yeah, it feels like the tension was definitely alleviated towards the end. So
Well, it was something I noticed, like, even towards the end, because I only caught the very last 5 minutes. But, like, one of the discussions, like, it seemed, like, just kind of judging by, like, people's questions was, like, it seemed like some people, like, were starting to understand, like, I've definitely heard a lot of, like, I don't get Facebook's 40 genders, or, like, but it seemed like I heard some of, like, people, like, developing or like understanding it almost.
I would agree. I mean, I caught that too. Look, I want to throw this out there. I was surprised. Two things. The first one, I was surprised that the gap between. So one of the questions was, I can't remember exactly how it was phrased, but it was like, it was not like how sexual are you, but like how high of a priority?
Desire.
How high? Yeah, that's essentially what it is. How high of a priority is your sexual desire or what? And it was like. We basically saw 1s and 2s, and then like 6s and 7s.
Yeah, we saw
out of
7s.
I thought that was interesting.
Well, usually that's one of the questions are more divisive, as well as the monogamy one that tends to be more divisive, right?
Yeah.
There's several people who didn't really place any priority on that, and there's people who placed a lot of priority on that. For me, I was on the lower end of the desire thing, and then on the higher end of the non-monogamous side. So like, when I saw that person switch over, like, that person has my paper.
Oh, that's funny.
I didn't say anything, you know, but that's like when I knew who had it. You know, so it's just one of those things that happen.
Well, there was that, and the other thing that I was saddened by, but maybe not necessarily unexpected, was it was like a difference between how you identify publicly and how you identify privately.
Yeah,
and there was some movement.
Yeah, there was people who change based on whether they feel comfortable enough to, and there's some people who inside have more complex ideas about who they are and what they are, but publicly they don't really talk about that very well. Like, so I say I'm non-binary and I use non-binary. My partner, however, and they're fine with me talking about this, might say they're non-binary to some people. However, to me, it's a longer answer because I know them. I know what the words mean, right? So they are a non-binary trans woman, right?
Okay.
Yeah. So
I get it. Okay.
Yeah. So that's a few more words added on, but not everyone will directly get it or correlate the ideas like I do if you're in the community, right? There are some people who are like, oh, I'm bi, but like they know, and the thing they're like, oh, I'm pansexual, biromantic, and I am not non-monogamous, right? So, like, if you're in the know, it tends to be more comfortable, but there's also people who aren't comfortable and will just be like, I'm straight out loud, but inside be like, oh, I'm bi-curious.
Yeah,
you know? Hetero
flexible.
Or,
again.
like,
Yeah.
even, like even in my case, like there's only a few teachers like I'm willing to like insert like, hey, you called me by the wrong pronouns, please going forward. Or
You should feel comfortable doing that with all your teachers.
I know, but
I'm not saying you
social
should, but I mean,
anxiety.
hopefully, ideally.
That's a
Anxiety
mental
hits
health
different.
problem. I'm working on it.
Well, I'm thinking back to something else, in my life. I remember when my little cousin, who went to an all girls high school, she came out to her high school. It was like a public
might have
assembly,
been hard.
everybody meet in the gymnasium kind of thing. And it was,
That is rough.
yeah, well, she,
How did that work out for her, by the way?
Very
I was
well.
just curious.
Very
okay,
well.
'cause-
Okay,
good
good
for
Yeah,
her.
yeah, yeah.
I do. That's
Very well.
good.
Me
I'm-
personally, I would just be a little bit embarrassed, not in fear of like my health if she felt comfortable enough to do it in front of that. But if there was an entire assembly look at me, and I just went like, I'm gay.
It was more than that. So, okay.
I would be low key terrified. Like, oh, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, this was a whole thing.
It was more of a bigger statement on, she wanted to be who she really was. This was one of those, like, you live there at the school.
Yeah.
It's like, they're your family
Yeah.
for like
Okay,
3.5 months.
Well,
So,
I'm,
you know what I
I'm
mean?
very happy that she had such a pleasant experience. And
Oh,
I think some
definitely.
of it's generational and how we've evolved as a society is how things change. Because I'm a little bit older than than everyone in this room. Probably closer to your age than their age. And
I'm 57.
It's
okay, no.
I'm not.
Okay, I was like, no, you're not. Shut up, you are not. But like, I know, like when I was in high school and stuff, I couldn't really be very upfront with my sexual orientation because I have a lot of masculine interests but I mean, I'm still a female. I would still like to have female friends, but because I had attractions to females as well as men, like it was very difficult. Like I would start to develop a friendship with a girl and like she would be like, yes, this person likes me even though I'm a nerd and stuff. And then like I'd be upfront about my sexuality and they would like bully me and pick on me. And so like for me, I just learned it was easier just to like be straight and weird, you know?
No, that's because listen.
Sorry, I almost like teared up a little bit.
No,
over
that's
that.
fine. That's absolutely
Yeah.
fine. Well, because look, I again, you're not that far removed from my cousin. She, she very athletic, and I'm not lying. Her name is the same as yours.
Oh wow!
Yeah. Interestingly enough,
I know.
but
yeah.
here's where I was going with this. It was more than just anecdotal. I try to picture, myself in that position where you want so badly to be able, even on like a friendship level, to feel like people see you.
Yeah.
But going back to what we're just saying, it's very difficult to do that if you have all these terms that help you understand yourself better, but nobody around you knows what those terms mean.
Yeah.
It can feel doubly isolating because now it's like
very much
it's not
so.
just that I'm showing you who I am. Now I have to educate you on. Like
the hell I
a
am,
pop
yeah.
quiz, like a vocab. And look, I relate insofar as everybody can relate to what it's like to not be understood, but to feel like there's no way, unless it's really laborious, and it takes a lot of effort to just break down, so people know the proper terms, so that they know you. I mean, that could be really daunting. That can be really difficult.
Yeah,
And when my cousin came out, there weren't all these terms, and I was thinking to myself, well, if there were. That would help her better articulate it. But then I thought to myself, she might actually lose people in terms of like explaining who she is. It might have the adverse effect. So is the solution to have everybody become more educated on these ways of sexual expression and sexual identity? I think so, maybe.
I mean, in some cases, I really think people should be more knowledgeable, at least some of the basic umbrella terms, because, I'm educating my parents currently as I'm slowly coming out as non-binary to them and stuff, and they're having to learn to change all their vocabulary that they previously held for me, Like, they can't say I'm their daughter or son. It's child or sibling or
Spawn.
Spawn, yeah, they say spawn a lot. They joke around with spawn.
Isn't
or
that a comic book
child of my
villain?
loins?
It is a comic book, yeah.
Yeah.
Todd McFarlane was the writer and artist.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I was a
Nerd.
big comic nerd growing up, so
Yeah.
that was one of
Nerd.
the reasons. Like, yeah, well, I had a hard time finding female friends because I like comic books and like computers and techno music.
I like
Okay.
that stuff too. That's why I had a difficult time making any friends.
Well, we can be
Oh,
friends.
that's
Well,
funny.
actually, you're a teacher. I'm a student, so that might be a weird boundary thing. But it's
It's like
nice
joking
meeting you.
philosophy.
It's fun.
Yeah, don't you ever think for 1 second we're on the same level. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. All right, we got to go. We're running the clock right here.
We're really-
Okay,
but-
so yeah. Closing thoughts. Well, and any plugs? We'll go around the room. First of all, I want to shout out again Orlando for hooking it up with the
Not
teas.
Orlando.
We had complimentary teas from Texas Nutrition. Shout out Texas Nutrition.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah,
Shout out
amazing.
Texas
We had
Nutrition.
free tea and
They came
everything.
through.
Yeah.
They offered
Thank
us.
you, Texas Nutrition. We got coupons for them. Do you know where do you want to
So
plug them?
I like the
they're
Ninja
actually
Turtle
super
flavor.
close. I don't know their address.
I know
You can
exactly
just
where they are.
Google Texas Nutrition. They're really close to Richland, though. They're
Yeah.
close to TI.
Yeah, they're on the
So,
TI
yeah.
campus. They're adjacent to a strip mall where there's a Subway and there's a dive bar called Drinks,
Wow,
Okay.
yeah,
where some Richland faculty
check them out.
Very
on the low.
basic,
no
though.
If you
doubt.
like
I'm
protein shakes and smoothies and whatnot, go ahead and check
I'm
it
just
out.
like amazed by how much
Sound
the
like a Cosby
teas,
impression.
like how sweet they are for them only being
That's not
20
good.
calories. Like I don't even know if
That's
I
not
fully believe
appropriate.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems a little
That
dicey.
watermelon
Yeah.
Jolly Rancher thing tasted just like candy, like real sugar, because I've been depriving myself of sugar, and I had it. I was like, oh my god, it feels real. But they were like, oh, it's only 20 calories. I'm like, I feel like it's 120,
It's all in your
but
head.
they
It's on
swore
your
up
head.
and down. So
Good ad for
It's
Texas
as real
Nutrition.
as you believe.
Oh, man.
yeah.
Yeah.
Again, I am Park Officer. The two who've been talking with me are Park members. Park is Pride at Richland College. We are the LGBT group. We meet every Thursday, except during breaks, from 12:30 to 1:30. We have an Instagram that's at the official park, and you can see us at the planetarium, WH116.
Yeah, come on.
And my closing statement is I would love to
statement.
come here again.
It's not a lawsuit, but okay.
Look, my closing statement is that I would love to come here again. It was a great
Hey,
experience, and I
you-
would love to talk more.
Y'all are welcome every single meeting.
Yeah,
Every single
this was
Thursday. Feel free to
actually
come
really
down.
fun.
I think I'm gonna. I think I'm gonna come because I usually go to a gaming club and it's really slow start. So I might. I think I'm definitely gonna chill with philosophy club.
Yeah,
a lot
come
more.
back. It's a
Awesome.
hang. You don't have to
Yeah.
stay for the whole thing if you don't want to. You don't have to
Yeah.
speak on the mic if you don't want to.
Yeah.
But yeah, every once in a while, feel free to chime in.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'll bring an interesting perspective. I know a lot about minorities.
Oh wow,
Well, I tried to.
That was like Babe Ruth calling his shot.
a minor.
I
expert.
mean, I know a lot less about race, but when we're talking about gender, sexuality, mental illness, stuff like that, poverty, I tend to know a lot more about those topics and ideas and philosophies and how people feel, which is philosophy, feelings. I feel about those topics than some other people do.
Okay.
Just enough, at least, to start a conversation and have a conversation. I don't know everything, obviously,
More than
but
enough,
No one
more than
does.
enough.
no one,
Yeah, I was
no
gonna
one
say.
knows
Knowledge is
everything.
infinite.
Manzi
No,
think
we
he
can
does,
do the rest.
but
We can do the rest.
But
Yeah.
that's I'd love to come by again.
Yeah.
I like random media.
That's awesome. Mancy thinks he does. I might need to change my name. The word man is literally my name. I mean,
No, it's okay.
But
We still love labels.
Oh.
Maybe one day we won't need labels, but we love labels right now. Labels
It's kind
are
of just whatever
chill.
feels good to you.
Whatever feels good to you.
Yeah.
Forcing labels, not okay. Accepting labels, great. That's
Yeah.
the general term.
how about we just say I only fit one label, Jeffrey Manzi?
Yeah.
There
You
are
could
peop-
say that if you.
There are people who only go by their name because they're just figuring out or
I like that.
deciding on
I think that's cool.
Oh, that would be weird.
I don't
Always
go by
refer to
any name.
yourself
Do
in the
not
third
refer to
person.
me.
I
I am an enigma.
oh, okay.
Might be appealing to
Johnny does what
narcissists.
Johnny says.
You just constantly hear your name. You just speak of yourself in the third person all the time.
God, that would be so annoying.
Okay, and of course, check out the Philosophy Club's Instagram page if you want to see images from the collaboration that we had on Tuesday. Quick plug, I'm about to publish an article, which I'm really excited about. I co-authored it. It's coming out in the Journal for De-Radicalization. It's called Identity Reconfiguration in the Core Needs Framework. Exit narratives among former far-right extremists. It's a quantitative study. It's
Interesting.
Oh my
Pretty
God.
rad.
We really need that
Easy
so
name.
badly right now.
Very
in this
interesting.
Yes,
world.
it'll be. I believe later this month it's going to be published. Pretty
Oh,
sure that's when they're
that's
doing it. So
awesome.
yeah, happy about that. Yeah, and Also, obviously, the Philosophy Club meets every Tuesday from 3:30 to 4:30 in EO 32. I just had like this wave of deja vu because this is the 8th season we were doing this, and I almost said a time and place from like 5 seasons ago. At any rate, yes. So I'm sorry, Ferdinando. Any final thoughts?
Ferdinando. You're saying really weird now.
Well, no, well, it's always, I mean, a good moment for me to learn something new. In terms of sexuality, it is a very interesting aspect for me because I don't really react too much towards sexuality. For me, it's not. It is important for me to understand this term, so I understand better people. That's pretty much what I want to say.
Yes.
I don't react too much into it. I'd rather do some other stuff. But so that sometimes I feel like I am in that 1% that you all speak about. So to have access to this information makes me better understand people around me.
And that's the whole idea is that, you can help learn something about yourself. Shout out to the in-studio guests. We got Rodney, we got Noah here. Thanks for being here, y'all. And again, my name is Professor Manzi, faculty advisor of the Philosophy Club. You are listening to KDUX Web Radio, broadcast live from Richland College in Dallas, Texas. We are the voice of Richland College. I just got word from Jack. Somebody in here does have corona, so we're now quarantined. We'll be in the studio all spring break, folks.
Yeah, we're live for
The podcast lives on.
14
No.
days straight.
Views expressed on this show are my own unless otherwise stated and do not reflect, rather, the opinion of KDUX Web Radio, Richland College, or the Dallas County Community College District. So we have a sign-off here on this particular program. It's a little slogan. It's think about it, but you got to say it really arrogantly.
Ooh.
So who wants to take us out here?
Think about it.
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 Have a good spring break, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.